The heat at Kandahar Air Base pressed down like a living thing. The air shimmered above the tarmac, carrying the scent of jet fuel and scorched sand. Along the flight line, a row of A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft sat like patient beasts, their gray skins dull under the afternoon light. Crew chiefs leaned on ladders, trading low jokes between clinks of tools, their laughter thin and tired against the steady tick of cooling metal. Inside the hangar, the air felt even thicker, full of dust motes floating through beams of sunlight. Captain Emma Rowe stepped in from the glare, her flight helmet tucked under one arm, her face calm beneath the brim of her cap. She wasn't tall, but something about the way she carried herself made the noise taper off. One of the mechanics half smiled, muttering about how pilots were supposed to be taller, but the joke died as she passed. Emma's eyes scanned the flight line with the quiet precision of someone who knew every shape, every sound of her aircraft. She reached the nearest A-10 and rested her fingertips against the metal skin, feeling the warmth through her gloves as if taking its pulse. The engines outside cycled down, leaving the hangar wrapped in that strange kind of silence found only on airfields between sorties. Somewhere far off, a C-17 rumbled skyward. Emma exhaled slowly, her gaze still on her aircraft. When the hangar door slammed open, a young airman stumbled in, sweat streaked with dust, head set askew, his breath catching in short bursts. His voice cracked as he called out, reporting that a ranger company north of Farah was pinned down under heavy fire. 124 troops, low on ammo, no close air support available. The words hit harder than the desert wind. The crew froze. A wrench clattered against the floor and rolled. Emma turned her head slightly toward the open doors, where the horizon burned red with sand and heat. For a moment, no one spoke. She didn't need to. Her eyes drifted back to the A-10 waiting beneath the lights, the reflection of its broad wings glinting in her visor. The air around her seemed to still. Whatever happened next, the decision had already been made. Emma Rowe grew up where the sky met the mountains, and the wind decided the shape of the day. Her home in northern Idaho sat between fields of barley and pine ridges that turned gold at sunset. It was a place where the air itself seemed alive, a place that taught you to listen before you spoke. Her father, Sam Rowe, spent most days in the cockpit of a weathered Grumman Ag Cat biplane that smelled of oil, dust, and sun-baked fertilizer. When the engine started, the whole valley seemed to pause and look up. He took her flying before she could spell her own name. The seatbelt crossed twice around her shoulders, her feet swinging above the rudder pedals, her eyes wide as the world tilted beneath them. He didn't teach from manuals or instruments. He taught by touch, letting her rest her hands on the yoke so she could feel the pulse of the air. He told her to watch how the wind moved through the crops, how it rippled like the surface of a lake, how that same current brushed against the wings. When the plane dipped low over the fields, she could smell the earth, rich and heavy, the place where everything began and ended. He said few things that weren't worth remembering. Respect the ground, he told her once, as they circled back toward the dirt strip lined with irrigation pipes. That's where everyone you care about lives. The words settled somewhere deep, not as a rule, but as a truth she'd never forget. Each landing, each rough bounce on the runway, reminded her of that connection, the bond between the air that carried you and the ground that waited for your return. Years passed, and the fields stayed while she changed. The Ag Cat grew quieter in the shed, and Sam's hands grew slower, though his eyes never lost their light. When she told him she was joining the Air Force, he didn't say congratulations or warning. He just nodded, as if the wind had already told him this would come. On a gray morning, she signed her enlistment papers at a small recruiting office in town. Her reflection in the window showed both the child who once chased clouds and the woman now choosing to follow them. Flying had never been about escape for her. It was about promise. The promise to be steady, patient, and unshaken when the air turned rough. Those lessons from Idaho stayed with her long after she traded the old biplane for the A-10. Every flight since then carried the same whisper from her father's voice, soft but certain in her memory. Respect the ground. Stay low. Bring them home. Emma's first lessons in the air came with the smell of new metal and jet fuel. The T-6 Texan II bucked slightly as she learned the rhythm of takeoff, her hands steady on the yoke. Instructors shouted corrections through the headset, voices sharp but not unkind. Every climb, every roll, every emergency drill turned her nerves into muscle memory. She learned how to read the sky like a language, translating each gust of wind and shift of weight into meaning. By the time she moved to advanced training, her instructors knew she didn't chase adrenaline. She chased precision. At Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, the A-10 Thunderbolt II waited for her. It was nothing like the sleek fighters parked across the ramp. The Hog, as pilots called it, looked slow and stubborn. A tank with wings. It wasn't built to impress. It was built to endure. Emma loved it at first touch. The fuselage bore scratches older than her commission, the kind of scars that told stories of pilots who had refused to leave their men behind. During her first taxi, she felt its weight and purpose settle through the seat. The controls were heavy, the response deliberate. This plane demanded patience, not flair. Her days blurred into drills and debriefs. She practiced gun runs over the desert. Her eyes locked on the range markers below. The G, the report from Helmand, sat in a folder that nobody wanted to talk about. The weather had turned bad that night. Wind pushing dust across the valley and rain cutting visibility to nothing. Command had issued the divert order, but Emma saw movement near the target, a group of civilians caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She stayed on station, adjusted her approach, and made the run. Her rounds fell clean, precise, and the feed later showed families walking away from the wreckage. The next morning, her aircraft was spotless. But her name wasn't. She was grounded pending review. Grounding didn't mean idleness. Emma still came to the flight line before sunrise. She walked the rows of 8 seconds with a checklist tucked into her sleeve. Flashlight beam tracing along the fuselages. She helped the crew chiefs with panels, hydraulic lines, and inspection logs. Her hands stayed busy, her eyes quiet. Sometimes she'd stop and rest her palm against a wing as if she were listening for something only she could hear. The other pilots passed by with the look people give when they're not sure if they're seeing courage or punishment. She never explained herself, and she never complained. Marcus Hale found her one evening, after lights out, sitting on the steps outside the hangar. He had worked with her before. A JTAC who trusted her voice more than most. The desert air was still the kind that carried far-off turbine hums and the faint smell of oil. He asked if she ever thought about quitting. She didn't look at him when she answered. You don't put a saw back on the shelf just because the wood's got knots. He laughed softly, then nodded. Understanding more than her words said. The floodlights dimmed across the field as the night settled deeper. Emma stayed seated, notebook on her knee. The last line of her checklist written in small, careful letters. Preparation is its own form of patience. She didn't know yet what was coming, but she felt it moving closer, like a shift in the wind before a storm. The storm came in low from the west, a copper wall grinding across the desert. Airfield lights flickered under the first wave of dust, their glow swallowed and reshaped by wind. Inside the operations room, the air was thick with the smell of coffee, sweat, and static. Controllers leaned close to their screens, straining through the noise of bad radio feeds. Every other transmission came broken, distorted by interference. Then one voice cut through. Ranger element. Contact north of Farah. Multiple wounded. Request immediate close air support. The words froze the room. The feed on the main monitor showed grainy drone footage, black smoke coiling from a canyon floor, tracer rounds slicing the night. Another voice followed, higher pitched. Urgent. Danger close authorized. That phrase carried a weight everyone understood. It meant they were nearly out of time. Emma heard it from the hallway. Standing under the hum of fluorescent lights, she didn't belong in the ops room anymore. But she walked in anyway. The noise quieted. Officers looked up, unsure if they should stop her. She stood in front of the screen, studying the chaos miles away, her face calm in the shifting light. The duty officer spoke first. Every bird's down or diverted. No one's getting through that storm. Emma's eyes didn't move from the canyon. The JTAC's voice crackled again. Weaker now, saying they were running low on ammo. Losing ground. Marcus Hale appeared beside her. Headset still in his hand. He knew that look in her eyes. He told her that if she broke orders again, her flying career would be over. She turned to him finally, her voice even and quiet. Then it's a good thing I didn't choose this job for a career. Outside, the wind began to shake the windows. A sound like the world drawing breath. Emma's gaze drifted once more to the monitors. Then to the storm pressing against the horizon. Her decision wasn't made aloud. It was already there, waiting in the stillness between heartbeats, certain and irreversible. The hangar lights flickered as the wind howled outside. Carrying the first sting of the sandstorm, dust slipped through the seams of the metal doors, swirling in golden spirals under the floodlights. Captain Emma Rowe walked across the hangar floor with steady steps, her flight helmet tucked beneath one arm. Every crew member in sight knew what she was about to do, but none of them spoke. Orders were one thing. Silence under pressure was another. The A-10 Thunderbolt II she stopped beside wore tail number 692, its gray skin marked with maintenance tape and streaks of old battle grime. She ran her fingers along the fuselage once, a quiet gesture of respect. Before climbing the ladder, Marcus Hale appeared out of the dust a moment later. Eyes narrowed against the wind. He didn't ask if she was sure. He just started pulling the intake covers. She checked the data plate. Then the fuel gauge. Full internal load. External tanks dry. But enough for what needed to be done. Her flashlight beams swept across the cannon access panel where the belts were already loaded. High explosive incendiary rounds alternating with armor-piercing incendiary, hydraulics steady, avionics in standby. Every movement was measured, deliberate. She didn't waste a word. Hale called out each confirmation in turn. Their exchange clipped and precise, like muscle memory. Battery on. Inverter check. Fuel pumps both. APU online. The turbine whined, coughing to life as the auxiliary power unit kicked in. Electrical hum filled the cockpit, the sound familiar and grounding. Emma adjusted her seat height, pulled the checklist closer, and flicked through systems. When the twin General Electric TF-34 engines spooled up, the hangar trembled. Somewhere behind her, a wrench clattered to the floor, followed by shouted voices. Unauthorized startup. Abort launch. Repeat. Abort immediately. The radio crackled with panic. Emma's voice stayed level. Acknowledged. She didn't say she'd complete. She eased the throttles forward, the nose wheel rolling over the painted floor. Guiding the hog toward the open hangar doors, wind slammed against the fuselage, dust wrapping around her like smoke. Hale ran beside the wing until the taxiway began, saluting once before she disappeared into the storm. The runway lights were little more than faint ghosts in the swirling grit. Airspeed rose past 90. 110. 140 knots. The hog's nose rattled, then lifted clean. The moment the wheels left the ground, the base vanished in a curtain of sand and thunder. Emma's breath stayed steady as she leveled into the void. This wasn't defiance. It was duty finding its own way into the sky. The storm swallowed the horizon until there was nothing left but copper light and noise. The A-10 shuddered as crosswinds slammed against the wings, the airframe groaning in protest. Dust clawed at the canopy, scratching across the glass like gravel against steel. The cockpit lights flickered. Altimeter needle trembling between readings. Emma adjusted trim, eased back on the stick, and felt the jet settle into the turbulent layer. She trusted the vibration more than the instruments. Her eyes moved over the panel, but her hands knew what to do. Before her mind caught up, Idaho had taught her that kind of flying. Feel the wind. Respect it. Don't fight it. In the ops center at Kandahar, Major Ellison leaned over the console, eyes locked on a radar display that kept blinking in and out. The single A-10 icon appeared, vanished, then reappeared miles north of the field. Controllers spoke in clipped bursts, trying to stabilize the feed through the storm interference. Someone said she'd never make it past the ridgeline. Ellison didn't answer. The room had gone quiet except for the hum of static. Every few seconds, her call sign flickered Icehawk 2-1 alive, then gone again. Inside the storm, the world was red and alive with lightning. The turbines groaned against the crosswind, the stick vibrating in Emma's grip. Her visor fogged along the edges, and sweat ran cold under her collar. She steadied her breathing and keyed the radio. Any station. This is Icehawk 2-1 inbound Farah sector. A broken voice replied through static. Canyon Grid 7. Multiple wounded. Taking heavy fire. Danger close authorized. The signal cut again, but it was enough. She flipped her target page, cross-checked the grid, and marked the approach path in her head. The first sight of the canyon came in flashes. Tracer rounds burned through the haze, lines of orange cutting upward from the darkness. Smoke twisted in narrow ribbons along the ridges. Then she saw it, the red flare marking friendly positions, barely visible through the sand. She lined up her run, lowered flaps, 2 clicks, and steadied her breathing. The hog trembled as she dipped the nose. At 1,000 feet AGL, she armed the GAU-8. The cannon's hum filled the cockpit like a living thing. She squeezed the trigger for a 2-second burst. The recoil hit like a heartbeat. The whole aircraft shuddered as 30mm rounds tore through the storm, their arcs glowing bright against the darkness. The ridge exploded in a chain of light and dust, enemy fire vanishing midstream. On the ground, the JTAC's voice came back. Half disbelief, half awe. Impact's perfect. Adjust 20 meters north. Still danger close. Emma exhaled. Voice calm. Copy. Re-engaging. She banked left, pulling the hog around in a tight arc. Her eyes fixed on the flicker of red smoke. The second run came lower, smoother, the jet shaking as the wind shifted. She lined up again. The storm roared around her. The crosshairs held steady. She pressed the trigger. The GAU-8 thundered, and the night answered back with silence. The cockpit was alive with alarms. Full bingo. Hydraulics amber. Terrain proximity flashing red across the console. The A-10 rattled under the strain, wings trembling as gusts of sand-laden wind slammed against the fuselage. Every surface felt alive, every sound urgent, but Captain Emma Rowe's breathing stayed steady. Each inhale slow, measured against the storm's pulse. She reached down, silencing one of the warnings, knowing it wouldn't matter. The hog had enough for one more run. Through the static, Marcus Hale's voice came across the auxiliary channel. Broken, but clear enough. Command says you're done. Icehawk, if you make it back, they'll ground you for life. Emma's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. the faint red glow of tracer fire cutting through the haze ahead. Her voice came back low. Calm. Certain. Not worried about the landing. Worry about the ones waiting below. She switched back to the JTAC frequency, catching fragments between bursts of interference. 35 still pinned near the riverbed. Mortars chewing up the ridge. No movement possible without air cover. Copy, she said. You've got it. She trimmed the nose down, lining up the run in her mind. The stick fought her. The storm howled. She adjusted throttle by feel, remembering Idaho winds, her father's voice about flying by patience. The hog dipped through the turbulence, leveling out at 300 feet above the canyon floor. Dust streaked across the canopy. Red smoke flickered below, barely visible through the murk. That was the mark. That was where they needed her. She armed the GAU-8, the cannon whirring to life beneath her seat. The aircraft vibrated as if it already knew. She took a breath, steady and deep. The crosshairs steadied over the ridge. Then she pressed the trigger. The roar of the Avenger cannon tore through the storm, a guttural thunder that shook her chest and filled the air with light. The ridge erupted in a chain of fire, mortar pits folding into flame. Secondary explosions rolled down the slope, echoing through the valley. On the ground, the Rangers' radios came alive with shouts of disbelief. Impacts perfect. Ridge neutralized. We're moving. Thank you. Icehawk. She pulled the hog level, smoke curling behind her. The engines coughed once. Then again, their rhythm faltering. The fuel gauge hit 0. Still, she kept her wings level. Feeling the updrafts under the storm's belly, in the ops center, Major Ellison stared at the radar trace, barely holding steady. She's using the storm to glide, he whispered, voice tight with awe. Around him, no one spoke. The screen flickered once, showing her path rising slightly, carried by the wind itself. In the heart of the storm, the hog flew on, battered but alive, lifted by skill, faith, and the quiet defiance of a pilot who refused to leave the ground unguarded. The engines coughed once, then sputtered, their rhythm faltering into silence. Emma Rowe felt the hog glide under her, the wings heavy with inertia, the controls stiff and resistant. She activated manual reversion, feeling the old mechanical linkages take over as hydraulic pressure vanished. Every adjustment required effort, every turn a deliberate fight against weight and momentum. Her arms burned as she nudged the stick and pedals, coaxing the aircraft to respond to her will. The storm had thinned, but not disappeared. Dust and sand still clawing at the canopy, obscuring the runway lights until the last possible moment. From the control tower, Major Ellison and the operations team tracked her faint radar return, their eyes wide as the icon shivered across the display. One soul on board. They whispered into radios filled with static. Emma's voice came back calm, measured, reporting the aircraft tired but alive. Visibility began to improve, revealing the faint glow of runway 31 through the swirling haze. She lined the hog up for a straight-in approach, scanning for obstacles while keeping her glide path smooth. Marcus Hale's voice broke through the auxiliary channel, gentle and precise, guiding her through gusts and turbulence. Ride the wind. Don't fight it. Hold your approach. She repeated the directions to herself, as if chanting a mantra, each phrase matching the pulse of the airframe beneath her. Crosswinds pushed the A-10 from the starboard side, making the aircraft crab slightly as she corrected with rudder and aileron. Nose gear indicator flickered intermittently. Adding another layer of uncertainty, Emma flared the aircraft just above the runway, holding the nose off to bleed speed and ease the touchdown. The wheels met the tarmac with a violent, controlled jolt, rubber screaming against asphalt. The fuselage shook and vibrated, but the hog stayed upright, stubborn as ever. Crash trucks encircled the aircraft, lights flashing, engines idling in readiness. Emma cut the throttles, and the turbines fell silent, leaving only the hiss of brakes and the muted wind brushing past the canopy. She sat back in her seat for a long moment, letting the adrenaline ebb. Outside, the airfield seemed to hold its breath. The hush that follows a miracle, sacred and weighty. The hog rested beneath her, battered but obedient, a testament to skill, disciplina, and quiet resolve. Emma Rowe unstrapped herself from the seat, muscles tight and sore, her flight suit streaked with hydraulic fluid and sweat. The canopy slid open, letting in a rush of cool desert air, carrying the faint scent of jet fuel mixed with rain. She climbed down the ladder slowly, each step heavy with exhaustion yet purposeful. On the tarmac, the line of maintenance crews, airmen, and officers waited silently, eyes fixed on her, their hands falling naturally to salute. The stillness was almost sacred, a collective recognition that this flight had been more than a mission. One by one, the salutes spread down the line. Faces showed quiet awe, gratitude, and relief. Emma held her gaze steady, acknowledging each gesture without haste. The moment stretched, a shared pause that measured respect, courage, and unspoken understanding. Then, among the line, a wounded Army Ranger captain stepped forward. His uniform was torn, his arm in a sling, but his posture remained crisp. He stopped a few feet from her, raising a perfect salute. Emma returned it, her hand steady and deliberate, holding the gesture long enough for the weight of the moment to settle between them. The Ranger lowered his hand and quietly spoke, telling her that her gun runs had drawn their path to safety. Emma shook her head gently, voice calm and measured, giving the credit back to the men and women who had held the line. She let the silence stretch, acknowledging the honor without embellishment. Somewhere along the line, a mechanic muttered the name Icehawk, and the disbelief on their faces revealed they had once thought her a rumor. Now she stood there, real and resolute, embodying the calm certainty of a pilot who had done her duty without expectation of recognition. The crew, the soldiers, and Emma shared a quiet bond, a sense of unity that surpassed rank, paperwork, or regulation. The wind rustled across the tarmac, and her faint smile was the only sound that seemed to move. She spoke softly, a small but honest reflection of her philosophy. Results don't show up to arguments. She turned her gaze back to the battered A-10, letting the moment linger. The reverence of shared respect, settling into the air like dust on the desert floor. The storm had finally passed, leaving the desert washed in soft light. Sunlight crept over the mountains, gilding the runway and scattering long shadows across the airfield. Tail number 692 sat under a tarp, its gray skin streaked with soot and scratches. Crew chiefs moved around it methodically, inspecting panels and pylons with the careful attention of medics tending to a survivor. Emma Rowe sat on the concrete steps near the hangar, the sweat and grime of the night still clinging to her flight suit. Lieutenant Marcus Hale settled beside her, both holding tin mugs of bitter coffee, zipping in silence. Around them, airmen whispered quietly, trying to reconcile the events they had witnessed. Their voices hushed as if not to disturb the fragile calm. In the distance, a convoy of medevac helicopters lifted off, carrying the wounded toward safety, their rotors slicing through the morning air like a soft reminder that life continued. Marcus broke the quiet, noting that command wanted to see her at 8 o'clock. Emma let a small smile curl across her face. "A few hours to be grateful," she replied, and nothing else. When he asked whether she expected a medal or a firing squad, she shrugged lightly. It depends on which desk signs first, she said, letting the humor cut through the tension. Later, a young lieutenant approached. Holding a sealed envelope, Emma took it carefully. Reading the official commendation for extraordinary heroism in combat, the disciplinary actions suspended pending review. The lieutenant hesitated, then added that his brother had been one of the medics she saved, asking her to pass along thanks. Emma's smile was small, genuine, sincere. I'll buy the first round when we meet back home, she told him, letting warmth and gratitude fill the moment. Marcus looked out across the tarmac, noting the stillness and the weight of what had happened. Your story will follow you for a long time, he said softly. Storms fade, she replied, but understanding remains. A gentle wind picked up, snapping the base flag against the pole. It was a new day, earned through courage, patience, and the quiet strength of those who answered when the ground called for help. The sun rose fully over Kandahar, painting the airfield in warm gold as puddles reflected the morning light. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet, measured calm. Crew members moved about their routines. Yet there was a subtle shift in the air, a shared understanding of what had unfolded through the night. The world felt steadier, smaller, and somehow more alive, as if everyone who had witnessed it carried the weight of that moment with silent respect. Captain Emma Rowe sat near the runway, her flight suit unzipped, gloves lying beside her, eyes fixed on the horizon. Behind her, tail number 692 rested under the morning sun. Battered yet steadfast, she didn't just save 124 soldiers that night. She reminded everyone why the A-10 still flew, why some souls are born to answer when the ground calls for help. Marcus Hale sat beside her, watching quietly, before asking if she would ever tell command the real reason she had disobeyed. She glanced at him, calm and steady, and said simply because the ground called for help, and the sky was empty. The air was alive with the faint hum of engines warming for the day, the flag snapping gently in the wind. The camera of memory lingered on Emma, still and unassuming, embodying the quiet discipline and moral certainty that had carried her through the storm. Courage is not just following orders, the voiceover reflected. It is knowing which lives those orders forget. The weight of that truth settled into the air, palpable, measured, and enduring. As the day began, the airfield carried the sense of promise, of duty fulfilled without spectacle. The hog rested silently, a witness to her resolve. While the wind and light bore testimony to what had been done, Emma's eyes followed the horizon, steady and unshaken. Sometimes, the world needs someone who does not ask for credit, who flies low, fights hard, and disappears into the smoke before dawn, leaving only a quiet legacy of honor and service.